You're watching Investor Insights, and in this video I'll be talking about the issues with Europe and the issues with the currency. Now the euro, the whole eurozone concept is doomed to failure. Again, I don't want to sound like a doomsday prophet. I'll just call it as it is. And the simple reason for its demise is this. You've got 27, with a few more countries to be added on, within the eurozone, and you've got 27 different governments. You've got 27 different fiscal policies, set of fiscal policies, but you've only got one central bank. And I don't know how that's going to work. Now, I always talk about the issues with America, about the ridiculous aspects of the quantitative easing program taken up by the Fed to try and spur on the economy. There's still no growth. Everything's in a zombie-like state. That's despite the Fed printing up trillions to try and keep interest rates low. That's another video. But at least America has one central government with one set of fiscal policies and one central bank. So you're a country of 50 states, one bunch of lawmakers, one government, and one central bank. So if they succeed together. If they fail, they all fail together. Europe is a totally different case. You've got, as I've stated before, all these different governments, all with their own agendas, all with their different populations, obviously, with different work ethics, with different standards of living, with different standards of productivity. But yet, all those states is governed by the monetary policy is all set by one central bank, the ECB. And even worse, the head of the ECB, Mario Draghi, is the biggest windbag that's out there. All talk and no action. He's been talking for 16, 17 months now. And all that talk has led to, yes, stock markets are going back to near 3-4 year highs, and bond yields have dropped. You've got governments who aren't in so much trouble because the interest that they have to pay on their debt is not going to skyrocket yet. And as recently as just this Thursday past, Mario Draghi actually came out and said the worst is over. We've only got beautiful clear skies ahead of us. I have no idea why people keep on believing somebody who talks a lot but hasn't done a single thing. But getting back to the issues with the euro as a common currency for all these countries, I just cannot see the point of trying to make one common currency for all these different countries that themselves cannot really take control of their own economic fate by issuing their own monetary policy. I mean, take a look, for example, at Greece. In the olden days, obviously pre-Euro, if the economy was weak and unemployment started skyrocketing, the government simply weakened the drachma. And through weakening the drachma, it would entice travellers to come into the country. It would make them happier to spend money. It would encourage its exporters, its manufacturers. I mean, that was a very simple plan. I mean, that's what most countries are doing now. They're debasing their currency in a race to the bottom to try and spur on economic growth. But you see, the Greek government can't do that now. It's mired in recession. I mean, 27 or 28% unemployment. You've got a euro which is surprisingly strong. The euro should be a lot lower than where it is if you take into account all the malaise that's floating around within the eurozone. Now, the issue with the actual different countries within the eurozone is that you've got the core countries, Germany, France, and they're doing okay, although France is sort of tapering off a little bit. But then you've got the periphery, and the peripheral countries are, for example, your Irelands, your Portugals, your Greece, your Cypruses. These countries, they're gone. Because of their affiliation with the euro and the fact that they cannot stimulate their own economy by issuing their own monetary policies, they have to rely on the ECB to constantly prop them up. I mean, how many times have you heard about the Greek bailout? This is an ongoing saga. They need X amount this month. In 2 months' time, they need some X amount billions more. And this goes on and on and on. Right? In the olden days, they wouldn't have to do that. As I said before, they can just manipulate their currency, weaken it, and that in turn drives the economy. You've got countries recently such as Cyprus who actually had a banking undercapitalization issue, and the ECB, along with the World Bank and the IMF, decided to help them out, to bail them out. But because it was a banking issue, they felt that the country should contribute. It wasn't going to be a full-blown bailout because the ECB or whoever it was deemed that it was in part their Cyprus's banking sector's fault. So what did they do? The government decided to impose a 40% levy. Whatever it is, it was jacked. They jacked it out of people's accounts. If people's accounts had more than 100,000 euros in it, the government just took out 40%. Tough. There was no rebuttal, no exceptions. If you had 100 grand in your account, they took 40% of it. If you had $1 million, you'd lose 400 grand. Now, in return, in theory, they got shares of the banks, but the banks aren't worth anything. And if you ask anybody out there if they would rather have shares of banks that are requiring bailouts or their own money, the answer should come pretty clear. So you've got all these peripheral countries that are suffering from high unemployment, bank undercapitalization. You've got inflation which is starting to rise. You've got constant, chronic underperformance in the manufacturing sectors simply because the euro is too high and the demand for their exports are just dwindling. Provided that the countries actually have a manufacturing sector. Now, this malaise is now spreading to the core. So you're seeing countries like France, which has been strong the past 3 or 4 years, been helping out with bailouts along with Germany, but now France is contracting itself. So you had the peripheral countries going down, and now you've got the core going down with them. And the biggest, most unfair part of the eurozone sort of treaty, I find unfair anyways, is the fact that they all have to look after each other. Yes, this sounds selfish, but if you were Germany and you were really robust during the past 5 years, straight after the global financial crisis, you've been able to hold your own. But because you're basically the largest economy in Europe and you're doing well, and your little brothers and sisters within the eurozone aren't performing, it's your duty to help them. It's your duty to take money from your taxpayers to to help out less fortunate countries. I know it's a noble cause, but first it's Greece, then it's Portugal, and it's Ireland, Cyprus, could be Spain. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. I mean, eventually the German taxpayer is just going to say enough is enough. I mean, imagine if you in Australia had a treaty with every other Asian nation to look after each other, and if one went into trouble, you would have to bail them out, irrespective of how that's going to affect you. And Germany is on the brink of recession itself. So if every other country fails, Germany would have to help to prop them up, and in doing so might go into recession itself. The government has to cut back on spending to help prop up less fortunate countries in the periphery. Imagine if you were a German taxpayer and the government had cutbacks, which could be your job if you were in the public sector, so that another person can keep his job within the periphery. That's insane. The euro, once inflation starts to rise, and this goes for any other state, once inflation goes up and central banks have no choice but to hike rates, bond yields are just going to just skyrocket. And then, as usual, as I've been saying for a long time, you're going to have a sovereign debt issue. And when this sovereign debt bubble blows up, that will be the end of a lot of economies within Europe. It sounds harsh. It sounds basically like the end of days is coming. But this should not be that much of a surprise to people. I mean, this has been coming for a long time. And it's people who listen to the central bank figures like Mario Draghi and believe what he says that have basically had their put an illusion in front of them. They just had their vision totally clouded by all this talking. And when the reality hits the fan, and I did use the word reality, it's going to be bloody, it's going to be messy, and many of the economies just won't survive. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if it's just going to be civil unrest or war or just total anarchy over there. But one thing's for sure, the eurozone will just have to be broken up. And the countries will just have to revert back to their currencies, to their own currencies prior to the euro. It's going to be a painful exercise. And you know what? I think give it another few years or another few decades, and there'll be another union that's going to be thought up, and the same principles that apply today is going to apply then. There's going to be a breakup, a whole bunch of money is going to be lost, the economy is going to fail again because people don't learn. And basically, I can't tell you when this euro breakup is going to happen. This thing could drag on for another few years. But the guiding factor will be inflation. You mark my word. When the crap hits the fan, and that's going to be inflation, things are just going to spiral and spiral and spiral downwards. And anybody out there who's trying to catch a falling knife is just going to get cut up and killed. Ideally, if you want to profit from this, you should pick a point, use your technical analysis, and sell the euro. Anytime it spikes against the US dollar, just sell it. I've been doing this continuously for 3 years, and it's paid my way. So next time you're considering a trade, think about the issues with Europe, and think about the most obvious, most simplest of trades that you can do on this one, and that's to short the euro.